Alpine Liquid Fertilizers is your full-season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Visit alpinepfl.com for more.
Sean Haney and Kelvin Heppner here with RealAgriculture.com. And in this week's Saturday email, and every Saturday we try to really hone in on a topic that's of great interest to not only farmers and ranchers, but also the agricultural industry. And this week, it's all about artificial intelligence. And we got some great content from the agronomists, where Lindsay Smith really dives into AI and the future of AI with some experts. We've also got Quebec farmer Nick Dubuque providing commentary on John Deere's unveiling of some of the product launches at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas from last week. And what I also wanted to do, though, to add, kind of round it all out, was Kelvin and I to sort of chat about this question of, can artificial intelligence actually deliver on the promises that have kind of been made? And Kelvin, you and I have had a lot of chats about this in the background, even about our own business at Real Agriculture. But if we think about, there's been some pretty big promises made by a lot of people. It kind of makes you wonder when you ask yourself that question.
Yeah, I think with any new technology, there's this curve. What do they call it? The Gartner Hype Cycle curve, where new technology is introduced and expectations shoot through the roof, and then it kind of peaks, and then you go through what they call the trough of disillusionment, I believe is what they call it, before the actual use of it actually goes back and increases, where you actually find productive uses for it. And in some ways, I think AI right now, there's many different forms of AI and applications. I think some of the low-hanging fruit is maybe further down that curve into that productive stage. But in some areas, I think, like you said, the promises have been very extravagant, and in terms of the solutions that AI could provide, many large companies, even some medium companies, are really trying hard to implement it. And there's been some big promises made in terms of the potential. And I think we are kind of in that unrealistic expectations, or maybe coming off of that into that trough of disillusionment in terms of some of the biggest promises. And they might still be 5-10 years away. I know everybody talks about how AI just 2 years ago versus today has changed exponentially, and who knows how fast it will continue to evolve. But it does feel like in some cases, companies are really trying to implement it, and I'm not sure that it's gaining as much traction or providing as much value at this point yet as what maybe they were expecting. But I don't know. Maybe I'm more skeptical than what you are, Sean.
No, well, I think it's just, you and I joke all the time. If you look at the disc profile, I'm an I, so I'm like, imaginary, and I'm sometimes in the clouds, and I'm the internal optimist. And you're a C, which is more grounded and more questioning, and maybe, I don't know, if not cynical, but just a little bit more skeptical. And so I think it's a nice ebb and flow, and yin and yang. I think sometimes there is overpromising, although I do see the pathways for it to, and I think it already is in some cases, it is adding to people's productivity. I look at how I personally use, some of the things like ChatGPT, or now we have access to Grok on X, and there's lots of options that are, Gemini is another one that is out there. I think, if you think about using it for, in small ways first, you're like, wow, we're making huge inroads. But if you're starting from the holy grail of AI use,
this is replacing a bunch of workers or doubling our productivity. It's not doing that yet.
You're going to be disappointed. I also think, and it's interesting, I've used this example before, I think on Real Ag Radio and in speeches and stuff, is when I toured that nutrient potash mine. Of course, they're thinking about how they can use AI from a mining perspective, no different than agriculture, right? And they showed how they are using telematics and, artificial intelligence to find the right seam on the bore head and all this kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily replacing people. It's just changing what people do. And it's the same with the dairy. Think about a dairy robot. A dairy robot's a piece of AI, right? More and more. And dairy farmers will tell you that when they put a dairy robot in the barn, they still go in their barn. They're just doing different stuff. right? Their role has changed. And I think if you look at it from that angle, instead of like we're going to replace all these people, your expectations are a little bit more grounded. I think that's the way to look at it.
Yeah, one of the challenges is though that incremental improvement in productivity is difficult to measure.
Oh,
How
no
do you
kidding.
measure whether somebody is 10% more productive with the same amount of time versus and dairy, the adoption of robots on dairies is a good example. It's shown obviously people feel there is a productivity increase and that they can spend their time, or that their time is better used in other places rather, and maybe it's sleeping, not getting up at 4 in the morning or 3 in the morning to milk at 4, that kind of thing. So, but I think it's difficult to measure, and that's also where a lot of these companies that are trying to implement it, I think right now it's difficult. How do you measure? Maybe somebody's using AI, but their coffee break is twice as long now because they have AI covering for them, like that kind of thing. How do you measure that?
I read an article about this where there were they had some quotes from some CEOs where they were like, we have not seen the benefits of ROI, and then when they were challenged on, how did you measure it, they're like, yeah, and it actually turned out it wasn't actually they weren't getting an ROI; it was the fact their measurement plan was incorrect. The other thing I think that's sort of missed sometimes is that, and I've seen this with some of the agronomy AI bots that are being developed, is that they're 90% accurate, 95% accurate. And I'm just making up numbers, but they're not 100% accurate, and therefore we sort of jump to the, well, they're not good. They'll make mistakes, and here's the secret: people make mistakes too. I wonder what the people accuracy number would be if they did some of the same testing. And so I think we have a higher expectation. Okay, if this is going to replace a person, or this is going to change the way I make decisions, boy, it better be better than if I had a person doing it or myself doing it. Like, how do you view that?
Yeah, exactly. And there are a ton of things that get done in the world, in the workplace, where people are only doing it at a 50 or 60% grade rate, maybe. And those are applications where AI, if it's doing it at an 80% grade rate, well, then maybe AI should be implemented in that situation. Other people might do those same tasks at a 90 or 98% grade rate out of 100, and maybe those people should keep doing that because they're good at that and they don't need AI to do that. But like, that's where I think AI can be used to complement different skill sets and different roles and different types of roles and that type of thing. So, and again, there's all these different applications. This is kind of talking like, when we're talking here, we're talking ChatGPT, and of course there's places where generative AIs or these large language models can write documents or fill out documents or write templates, and even if in our application working in the media, if we experiment with it, I would say that ChatGPT often can write an article that we would give a B grade to, maybe a plus, occasionally an A. But the best writer, say Lindsay Smith, is working on it. She's writing it at an A+ level. So then I don't see ChatGPT replacing a Lindsay Smith, hey. But that's where it will complement other. And of course, the world is filled with marketing material, and a lot of that in the past has taken an immense amount of resources, and it can be written with like that's. So there's all these different applications. Of course, this isn't even talking about automation in the field and the visual.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to ask you about that from equipment. We're in a bit of an equipment turn down right now. Sales are down. The Association of Equipment Manufacturer numbers show that. I'm curious what happens from an investment standpoint from the companies, because when there's tough times from a profit perspective, they pull back on research dollars, right? And because you're thinking about the next quarter. And so I wonder if it slows down some of this, or does the machinery sector view AI as such it's coming and we can't afford to be a laggard, that the research and development doesn't slow down, or maybe it speeds up because that's the next thing that's going to lead to more profitability, whether it's on new machines or retrofitting or whatever. I think that's kind of a fascinating question that we don't know the answer to yet.
Well, and again, we don't like to talk about it replacing labor, but I think it makes labor more efficient. And so as labor becomes more expensive, and as we, of course, if we want to talk politics here and tie that into AI, and immigration is under immense pressure, and that's where a large source of our labor in agriculture and the food industry has come from. If AI can make existing employees more efficient, it might not mean layoffs, but it means more output per employee. And I think AI, there's still going to be immense value in making workers more efficient because of how high labor costs are. And so we are already seeing that at the dealership level in the equipment industry. I think that's one place where we've also seen AI advance further than in maybe other parts of agriculture in terms of resources to dealers and mechanics in the shop in terms of repairs. And they talked about it on the agronomists. Darcy Cook and Patrick Walter talked about it with Lindsay on the agronomists on Monday about like feeding an entire equipment manual that is 500 pages long into an AI model and having that AI model work way better than any chatbot worked in the past in terms of giving an answer. And again, these models all come down to the quality of the data that goes into them is what they know they're limited to that. And so I think companies will continue investing in improving that data, and that snowball is just rolling downhill in terms of the amount of data that they're building to put into these AI models so that they give much better answers than they have in the past.
Yeah, it's very interesting times indeed. Very curious what the audience has to say. If you got a perspective on this, maybe further questions or angles you think that we should be diving into in regards to artificial intelligence in the industry, there's just so many ways to look at it and try to unpack it. So, send us an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. And if you don't get the Saturday email, like I mentioned at the beginning, where this week we're dealing in artificial intelligence, I'm sure next week it could be definitely what is sort of the reaction of the White House. There's always a topic that requires some sort of a deep dive and looking further into the thread. Please also make some suggestions there as well, or you can make sure you get the email by going to realagriculture.com/subscribe. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
This is just the AI version of Kelvin. This wasn't actually Kelvin here. All opinions can be attributed to AI.
Careful what you say. Some people may believe you. So yeah, I would have programmed it to make sure it always agrees with me and it doesn't like say no. Sean.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Too smart.
Have a great weekend, everybody.